Imagine being awakened in the middle of the ocean, chained up by a psycho killer and surrounded by sharks, with no way to escape the deranged serial murderer, who enjoys torturing and playing deadly games with women who come alone as tourists to the beach. It is a movie about thrill-seeking tourists heading out to sea for the infamous Tucker experience, a shark cage dive promising the ultimate adrenaline rush. What begins as an exciting adventure quickly twists into a nightmare. Tucker, the man guiding them, is no ordinary host. He's a deranged killer with a fascination for turning shark encounters into torture. At first the dive feels surreal, giant sharks circling the cage, hearts racing underwater, but soon Tucker shows his true colors. He murders one of the tourists in cold blood, and begins a deadly game of luring, trapping, and killing for fun. The movie starts with two Canadian tourists arriving at the coastal city of Australia for a unique adventure they've heard about, the notorious Tucker experience. Rumors say it's a once-in-a-lifetime dive where you descend into the open ocean inside a cage, face to face with real sharks. It sounds terrifying, but that thrill is exactly why people pay for it. A young couple, Heather and her boyfriend, nervous but excited, they chat with local vendor Dave until their guide finally arrives. This is Tucker. At first glance he seems professional, friendly, charismatic, and confident about the sea. When he realizes no one knows they come here, he welcomes them with a smile and says it's time to begin. The boat speeds out into deep waters, far from the safety of the shore. He tells them about his near-death experience with a shark when he was a boy, and also shows them the huge scar in his body. After arriving at their destination, Tucker starts to pour blood and meat into the water to lure the sharks near them. Seeing this and after listening to Tucker's story, Heather starts to get nervous and panic. Noticing this, Tucker sings the baby shark song and playfully lightens the mood, which helps Heather to ease up the tense. Heather and her boyfriend get into the water inside the cage, hearts racing. The steel cage is lowered, swinging gently above the waves before dropping into the sea. Tucker reassures them it's safe. They climb in, descend under the surface, and suddenly, they're in another world. Sharks glide out of the blue gloom, sleek, powerful, terrifying. For Heather and her boyfriend, it's exhilarating. Seeing Heather still nervous, her boyfriend offers his hand to reassure her, and she holds his hand and watches the predators circle, brushing against the bars. It's the thrill they came for. Back on the boat, Heather was so happy, and shared her joy with Tucker, who helped them get into the boat. But the mood shifts in an instant. Back on deck, Tucker picks up a knife. Before the boyfriend can react, Tucker stabs him in the stomach. Shock freezes Heather as Tucker drags the bleeding man across the deck and shoves him overboard. Blood spills into the water, and within seconds the sharks attack. The ocean boils red as they tear him apart. Heather screams helplessly seeing this, and that's when we see Tucker's true face. The guide is no guide, he's a predator. He doesn't just organize shark dives, he uses them to kill. On the other side of the same shore, we can see a young woman, riding the waves with her surfboard. She is Jane, our heroine, an American tourist who came alone to enjoy the sea. At a supermarket, a man was asking for the jumper cables to the cashier, who says it's out of stock. Turning around, he sees Jane and asks her if she has any, but Jane just ignored him, and paid for her drink and went out. Outside, she takes the ice cream she shoplifted, and returns to her van with joy, only to be spotted by the same young man whom she met inside. He asks her to give him a ride to his car, which is parked a few blocks away. He threatens that if she refuses, he will tell the shop owner about her shoplifting things. With no way out, Jane agrees to take him on the way. He introduces himself as Moses, a real estate agent. He starts a few conversations with Jane, which only enrages her, and she asks him to shut up. After dropping him off, she notices a surfboard in his car and starts the conversation to find out they both liked similar things and have common taste in sports and music. He tells her even if she doesn't help him there, he wouldn't have exposed her. That night, they both shared the intimate moments in Jane's van parked before Moses's house. On the bed, Moses asks about her interest in surfing. Jane tells him there is nothing for her in the land, and they talk about their passion and habits. When Moses went inside his house to make something to eat, Jane was gone. She drove away without saying anything to him. Jane reaches the beach, getting ready for surfing. She met Tucker nearby, who had a small talk with her, and left. Jane sees the message from Moses, who asks her, "Is he that bad?" for her to run away without telling him. When Jane was seeing the message and laughing to herself, Tucker comes from behind and covers her face with a plastic bag. In terror, Jane starts to jump, kick and struggle to escape, eventually becoming unconscious. Tucker takes her in his van and drives away to his boat. By the dawn, Moses reaches the place and notices Jane's van was there, but no trace of Jane. It makes him a little uneasy, and when he calls her, there is no response. Meanwhile, Jane wakes up in a bed tied up by chains. Panicking, Jane shouts for help and searches her surroundings. Seeing her, Heather, who was tied up nearby in a bed, calms her and tells Jane, "It is no use in screaming because we were locked in his boat. Then only we can see the boat, which is in the middle of the ocean with no way to escape." Understanding the situation, Jane analyzes her surroundings for any way to unlock the chains, and notices a name was scratched on the wall, probably a previous captive. On the other side, Moses notices Jane's van was taken away from the beach and feels something is wrong. He rushes to the police and files a missing complaint. At first, the officer doesn't take it seriously, but when Moses tells him there is no way for Jane to abandon her van, which is basically her home, the police officer asks about Jane's details, but Moses doesn't even know her last name. They had known each other for not even one whole day. At the boat, Heather and Jane talk about their life and the reason they came to Australia. During the conversation, they both understand that no one is going to search for them if they went missing. Jane was tired of struggling to break the chain. Seeing this, Heather, who lost all her hope, tells Jane the last thing she had with her mum was a huge fight. Her mum refuses Heather to take a gap year and plans to let her get to the law school. But now, Heather regrets not listening to her mum. Jane comforts her and tells her we will definitely get out of her, and Heather will see her mum soon. Heather asks about Jane. She tells her she lived in foster care, changing one family to another without ever getting real family affection. While talking, Jane notices Heather's swim dress has a metal wire strap and asks her for it to open the lock. Heather removes her bra and passes it to Jane to separate the metal wire and try to open the lock. At the same moment, they heard the footsteps and hurriedly hid away the metal wire. Tucker comes with food. He is acting like he is serving them a fancy meal and telling them to eat because there is a night show today. But honestly, whenever he says stuff like that, it feels like he is up to no good. Heather only takes the milk and nervously starts to drink it. To avoid any suspicion, Jane shouts at Tucker, distracting him from Heather. Jane asks for the bread and eats it. After Tucker left, they sighed and started to pick the lock with the metal piece. Suddenly, Jane feels something is wrong and notices Heather is already unconscious. Realizing Tucker spiked the food with something, Jane starts to lose consciousness. At the very moment, Tucker comes in and takes away the metal wire from her hand. When Jane opened her eyes again, she was tied to a chair at the deck and Heather was laying on the ground nearby unconscious. She was attached to a mechanism with straps and Tucker was fixing the cameras on the side in silence. He slowly walks towards Heather and cuts a lock of her hair. After that, he wakes her up. Heather was in panic and started to scream while Tucker started to tell them that sharks never attack humans because they don't like human meat. But over time, due to fishing, the bait used to attract them, sharks start to associate boats with food. He activates the mechanism which lifts Heather up and moves her above the sea. Ignoring the panic screams from the girls, Tucker starts to lower Heather into the water, where he already lured the sharks with blood. He positioned Heather inside the water like a bait, and started to record the moment Heather was bitten and torn apart by the sharks with heart-wrenching screams. While Jane was screaming to leave Heather, the sickly psycho seemed to be enjoying Heather's tournament. After Heather dies, Tucker slowly turns away from his camera and tells Jane tomorrow night is her turn. At the room, Jane scratches Heather's name at the wall, only to find so many names were already there under the paint. At the cabin, Tucker was drinking and dancing to the music as if he achieved something big. He walks to a place and puts a videotape in a cover along with Heather's lock of hair, labeling it as Heather, and placing it in his collection of tapes. The rack is filled with dozens of videotapes with several women's hairlocks as if it was his sickly collection. The next day, Heather's remaining were floating on the sea, and at the shores, unaware of Jane's situation, Moses went surfing and searched for her in hope of he would meet her. Moses went surfing and when he see a broken surfboard, he thought of Jane and wonders how she is doing, but our Jane just lays on the bed in silence, which surprises Tucker. He brings her food but she kicks it and yells at him to go away. Seeing the fierce screams, Tucker seems to enjoy it and starts to talk about his twisted thoughts about sharks and killing as if he was the god who can determine their fate. But Jane just yells at him. He is just a pathetic psycho who enjoys tormenting weak, lonely girls because of his wounded, unloved past. Even though Jane's words hit the nail in his sore spot, Tucker just shows her a bucket to use as restroom and left. Seeing the plastic bucket, Jane had a brilliant idea and broke the handle's sharp edge with a plan in mind. Tucker was eating fish, watching Heather's video as if it was some interesting movie, and making a syringe with sedatives for Jane. He approaches sleeping Jane to inject the sedatives only to be attacked by her with the sharp bucket handle. Jane takes the key from Tucker, unlocks the chain and blots out of the room, but Tucker wakes up and stops the door before she closes it. Realizing she is no match for him, Jane runs up to the stairs but Tucker grabs her leg and injects the drug. Jane kicks him out and runs to the control room, trying to get contact and ask help through the radio, but the control room is in total shutdown by Tucker beforehand to prevent something like this to happen. Desperate, Jane finds a ship before her where people seem to be partying. She screams on top of her lungs for help but all in vain and the drugs start to kick in. Tucker tries to catch her but she pushes his camera into the sea knowing it's his important possession and faints into the sea as the drugs take action. Jane falls unconscious as the sedatives take hold, her body sinking beneath the waves. But just before she disappears into the depths, Tucker's hands drag her back up. He cradles her like a possession, not a person, and locks her again in the cabin. By morning, Jane wakes in chains, her body weak and trembling. She notices Tucker is gone, perhaps into town. Across the ocean, Moses arrives at the beach with police officers. His instincts scream that something is wrong. Jane's van is gone and the empty sand offers no clue. Desperate, he pulls out an app called WaveWatch, a live feed from coastal cameras. Scanning through, his heart stops. He sees footage of Jane's van and a truck with the name Tucker Experience pulling away. Moses rushes to the police with the proof, but Tucker's number goes unanswered. Later he drives to the harbor and finds Tucker's boat docked. As he boards, he hears muffled screams echoing from below. He breaks a window and crawls inside. There, chained and terrified, is Jane. He rips the tape from her mouth and she begs him to unlock the chains, to call the police to hurry before the killer returns. But just as Moses makes the call, Tucker appears. The two men clash violently on the deck. Moses fights with raw desperation, landing blows that nearly end the psycho's game. But at the very last second, Dave, the vendor from shore, arrives and mistakes Moses for an intruder. He strikes Moses unconscious. The confusion costs him his life. Tucker drives an axe into Dave's skull, killing him instantly. Hours later, Moses wakes, chained beside Jane. His face is bloodied, his body weak. "I'm sorry," he tells her, voice breaking. Jane shakes her head, tears in her eyes. She admits she ran away from him that night, because she thought she was better off alone. Moses whispers, "No one's better off alone." Their connection deepens, but their time is running out. Tucker soon enters carrying a harness. He straps Moses into it, cutting a lock of his hair as if preparing another trophy. Jane screams for him to stop. She pleads that Moses isn't a tourist, that people will search for him, but Tucker ignores her. He flips the switch. Moses is lifted above the ocean, dangling over the blood-lured sharks. The water churns as fins circle below. Jane shouts for Moses not to move. He obeys, staying utterly still. For a moment, the sharks lose interest and retreat into the depths. Tucker is furious. Enraged, he drags Moses back up and stabs him again and again. Blood pours into the sea, summoning the predators once more. Tucker lowers him back, but before the sharks attack, a helicopter sweeps overhead. The killer has no choice but to halt. Back inside the cabin, Jane stares at the unconscious Moses, guilt etched into her face. She knows she brought him here. Determined, she does the unthinkable. She breaks her thumb to slip the cuff. Agonizing pain tears through her, but still she cannot free herself. With a cry, she bites into her own hand, blood streaming until the bone slips loose. The cuff falls away. When Tucker returns with food, Jane is gone. She ambushes him, locking him in the cabin, then races to the control room to start the engines. For a heartbeat, freedom feels real. but Tucker smashes through the emergency hatch, cutting the power and plunging the boat into silence. Jane grabs a flare gun and spots a party yacht nearby. Hope surges, until Tucker lunges again. She fires the flare straight into his chest, slamming the door and escaping through a skylight. The chase spills across the deck, metal clanging, breathless fury. Jane strikes him with a pan, drives a knife through his hand, and flees toward the open water. She swims, lungs burning, when Tucker pursues in a speedboat. He overtakes her at the shoreline, dragging her back in brutal silence. Hours later, Jane wakes, suspended in the harness above the sea. Moses, bound and beaten, watches helplessly. Tucker sets his camera, grinning, ready to film his grand finale, but fate turns. A massive great white shark appears, scattering the others. Tucker panics, striking at it with a grappling hook, but loses his weapon. Jane, fueled by terror, climbs the rope, but falls, plunging back into the sea. Miraculously, the great white ignores her and glides past. She realizes the predator has no interest in her. Seizing her chance, Jane claws her way back onto the boat. Tucker hunts her across the deck, but in his frenzy, he makes one fatal mistake. The great white returns, slamming the hull. Tucker loses his balance and falls into the sea. His camera keeps rolling as the shark drags him under, tearing him apart in a storm of blood. The rope snags Jane's ankle, yanking her down, but she hacks it loose and breaks free. Gasping, she surfaces. The boat rocks in chaos. Jane pulls herself back on board, where Moses lies unconscious. She fires a flare into the sky. At last, a nearby vessel turns and speeds toward them. She collapses beside Moses, clutching his hand. Through tears, she whispers that she once thought there was nothing for her on land, but now she has him. His eyes flutter open, weak but alive. He smiles. The nightmare is over. The horizon glows with dawn as rescuers arrive, and for the first time Jane believes there might be a future.